Strange prohibitions in Singapore shock the whole world. Singapore is one of the safest, cleanest, and most civilized countries in Asia. But did you know that this always praised country is forcing its people to accept many strange and unreasonable prohibitions? Some of the prohibition laws in this Lion Island nation are so strange that they even affect very normal human habits. To make sure you won't get into any trouble in Singapore, please stay with me until the end of this video. Number 15. Ban on chewing gum. You are chewing gum and walking around the streets of Singapore with your friends when suddenly the police come to arrest you and take you to headquarters. You are confused and don't know what serious crime you have committed to get arrested, but after a while of questioning, the police told you that the reason you were arrested was simply because you chewed gum. Singapore officially imposed a ban on chewing gum and selling candy in the 1990s with the aim of cleaning up the street. According to Singapore statutes online, the first penalty for selling chewing gum can be up to $100,000 or a maximum prison sentence of 2 years. Meanwhile, people who chew candy and spit gum on the street can be fined up to $30,000 and detained for about a week. According to the Singapore Housing and Development Authority, every year the agency has to spend $15,000 to clean up gum residue on the streets around apartments and even on public transport seats. Initially, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's first prime minister, opposed the absolute ban on chewing candy, saying that the ban was too hasty. People's behavior could be corrected through dissemination and fines, mainly for repeat offenses. But everything changed in 1987 with the introduction of the high-speed train MRT system. Many people, when taking the train, had gum residue on the train sensors, causing the train door to fail and the train to crash discontinuously. Since then, chewing gum has been completely banned on the island. If you come here, you can still use gum, but only eat it at home and throw the gum in the trash. Otherwise, you will soon meet the Singapore police again, because they manage this issue very strictly. Number 14. Nudity is prohibited in the house. Let's agree that home is our private place. No one can prohibit us from wearing or undressing in the house. But in Singapore, they prohibit that. Wandering around your house naked in an obvious way, such as leaving the door open, can get you a $2,000 fine or a 3-month prison sentence. According to Singaporean law, nudity is considered a form of cultural disgrace, violates regulations of conduct, and can be considered annoying to others. Singapore has always made it a point to maintain a decent environment and ensure respect for all members of the community. So even if you are naked in the house, if someone accidentally catches you, you can be arrested and fined. In addition, being naked on the street will also receive the same fine. So in general, when coming to this country, you should always wear clothes with enough fabric to avoid breaking the law and getting into unnecessary trouble. Number 13. Gift-giving restrictions. Giving gifts is a very natural action to express affection, but it is not as simple as you think. Singapore is a multicultural country, so giving gifts is extremely complicated. For example, you should not wrap a gift in white because white symbolizes mourning. Gifts such as watches, handkerchiefs, and flowers should also be limited, because in Chinese culture they carry funeral significance. For Muslims or people of Indian origin, be careful not to give items made of pigskin. Always use your right hand or both hands to give gifts. In addition, gifts are often given on farewell occasions. When receiving a gift, you should refuse it 3 times before actually receiving it, and do not open the gift in front of the giver. After hearing these rules, at first I felt that giving gifts here was troublesome. We have quicker ways to receive gifts from each other. But after studying everything carefully, I see that we must also respect their culture. Keeping the rules will make the country more interesting and diverse. Number 12. Prohibition on movement. Walking across the street can also get you fined or jailed, which may sound strange, but it is a law that applies in Singapore. The law applies to people who go 50 meters beyond the markings when crossing the street. For your first violation, you can be fined on the spot up to $1,000 US, or face 3 months in prison. This fine will double for the second violation. I have interesting information that many foreign tourists have violated this law. The fines are so high that the Singapore government has enough to build an additional 12-kilometer road. Number 11. Prohibition on sales. As a country that values trust, Singapore strongly condemns fraudulent trading practices. If you intend to sell something in this country, it is imperative to do business in a clean manner. According to Singapore law, they prohibit cheating on size and weight when buying and selling goods. Otherwise, they can be sentenced to 1 year in prison, fined, or both. Tackling fraud is an important part of the country's efforts to protect consumers, maintain market fairness, and build a transparent business environment. Singapore continuously strengthens controls and surveillance at border gates and retail points, as well as using technology to prevent and detect cases of fraud. Singapore is one of the countries with a developed economy and a strict legal system, and it regularly implements measures to protect consumers and maintain fairness in the market. Regulators and governments can work closely with businesses and communities to ensure that fraud has no place in business and commodity trading, so if you buy in Singapore, you can rest assured about the quality. Number 10. Taboos in the New Year. Many people want to experience welcoming the New Year in the Lion Island nation of Singapore because it is interesting. But before participating, you need to clearly remember the cultural rules so as not to disrupt other people's happy days. Local people during the first days of the year in Singapore avoid cleaning their houses and washing their hair to avoid losing good luck. Do not break furniture, especially mirrors. Do not wear white clothes. Do not use needles or scissors because they will bring bad luck. In addition, depending on each ethnicity, they also have their own taboos. But don't worry too much because the Tet atmosphere here will really make you feel wonderful. When the new year comes, a jubilant festive atmosphere takes place throughout the first month, from January 1st to the end of mid-February, to welcome a peaceful and lucky new year. All Singaporeans will join in. Let's clean up the house, wash blankets, arrange furniture, and decorate our living or working place beautifully so we can be ready to welcome the new year in the most neat and tidy way possible. Besides, Singaporeans also go shopping for new clothes and outfits to wear in the early days of spring to have the most beautiful appearance. Singaporeans believe that this is the simplest way to help dispel the bad luck and misfortune of the old year and get ready for a new beginning full of energy and excitement. Number 9. Taboo numbers. You are 4. The first time I came to Singapore, I encountered a lot of difficulties when I couldn't find the 4th floor in the hotel elevator. But luckily, a Singaporean girl guided me and explained very clearly why there wasn't one 4th floor in the elevator. Turns out, according to Singaporeans, number 4 is a taboo number in Singapore. Singaporeans, similar to some other Asian cultures, view the number 4 based on the principle of yin and yang and an aversion to this number. In Chinese, this phenomenon can be called tetraphobia, where the number 4 is considered unlucky, because in Chinese the pronunciation of the number 4 sounds like the word for death. Therefore, the number 4 is often avoided to prevent bringing bad luck, especially in situations such as choosing apartment numbers, product numbers, or other important numbers. In addition, numbers like 7, even numbers 303, 37, and 69 are also considered negative and unlucky. They hate and fear the number 7 the most. Normally, they try their best to avoid encountering this number. Singaporeans believe that black is an unlucky color, and purple is also a color they do not like. They only prefer pink and red because, according to them, these colors symbolize solemnity, intense enthusiasm, joy, courage, and represent tolerance and generosity. Number 8. Pork and alcohol ban. I was banned from entering Singapore in 2018 for carrying a bit of bacon in my luggage, and until then, I didn't know that this country bans pork and alcohol. It's hard to believe that the 2 most popular foods in the world are banned in this country, but ultimately it's because of culture. You need to know that Islam is the main religion in Singapore, and according to the rules, pork and alcohol are completely prohibited. Pork is considered an unclean food for the body, even in the sacred Quran, where it is clearly written that certain foods should not be consumed, with pork being one of them. According to the teachings of Muslim scholars, pork is not clean and is not good for human health because it contains too much fat and is highly susceptible to containing toxins and bacteria. The pig's living environment is also not clean, making their meat vulnerable to human diseases. Meanwhile, Muslims are also not allowed to use stimulants such as alcohol, as they can make people lose their reason and easily cause regrettable sins. Believers are always very respectful and obedient to the teachings of their Almighty God. Thus, the governments of some countries following this religion also ban alcoholic beverages. Believers never drink beer or wine in their lives, so when you come to Singapore, you should never invite locals to drink alcohol. It's like provoking them. This action is also considered aggressive and contemptuous by the people here, and you must avoid it. Number 7. Tipping is prohibited. No matter how satisfied you are with the service of the staff in Singapore, don't be foolish enough to tip them. I don't want to turn you into a stingy person, but I'm giving this advice to protect you when you come to this country. In Singapore, according to general regulations in the beautiful Lion Country, service staff in all departments are not allowed to receive tips. Therefore, restaurants and hotels have added a 10% service fee to each bill. However, baggage handlers at hotels are entitled to receive gratuities from guests. So if your luggage is brought to your room by the staff, remember to give them a few dollars. As for other employees, even if you don't give them a tip, they will still serve you thoughtfully. Even if you tip, and they accept, they will still be punished by the restaurant for asking for more money from customers. The act of tipping when they have already received an additional 10% of the bill is also considered disrespectful to the staff, so put your tips away and just pay the restaurant bill in full. Number 6. Don't point fingers at others. I told you already, Singapore has a lot of Muslims, so you have to be extremely careful in every action, like visiting a Muslim country. The rule that many people often overlook is using the index finger. In some Muslim cultures, using the index finger to point can be seen as a sign of disrespect and ostracism. Muslims often consider this a polite gesture when referring to a person or when asking for directions. When communicating with Muslims, you absolutely should not use your index finger to point at any person or object. Using the index finger when communicating is considered an extremely offensive action, especially offensive to the other person. You need to pay special attention to this, as some Muslims may express their outrage right away. It's forbidden to use the left hand. Okay, after you've learned how to hide your index finger, the next thing I want you to do in Singapore is hide your left hand. Don't use it for anything if there are locals around. It sounds quite strange, but it is really necessary. The left hand is considered unclean. In some sacred religious rituals and important customs, people do not use the left hand. For example, they don't use it for holding food offerings, shaking hands, or giving and receiving gifts. If you have to use both hands, the left hand must be placed below the right hand. Besides, using the index finger to point is also a taboo in Muslim countries. If you want to point, you can only use the thumb of your right hand, while the remaining 4 fingers must be clenched into the palm of your hand. Muslims often use their right hand for rituals and important events in their lives. According to Islamic beliefs, the left hand is associated with personal hygiene, so it is often considered unclean. Therefore, when coming here, you should not use your left hand to hold objects and food. When Singaporeans give gifts or deliver things to you, you should use both hands to receive the item, with the left hand under the right hand. Okay, if you've learned how to use your hands and fingers, now we get to the custom part. Number 4. Revealing clothing is prohibited. The weather in Singapore can sometimes be very hot, but don't let that stop you from choosing cool clothes to go out. You will likely be fined heavily because in Singapore, wearing skimpy clothes can be considered a violation. This regulation is intended to maintain a kind environment and respect the cultural values of the island nation. Not only when you arrive in Singapore, but if you dress too revealingly, you will also have difficulty entering the country. Public areas, such as shopping malls, parks, and other public facilities, have cover-up and respectful dress codes. If they do not comply, violators may be asked to change their clothing or leave the area. Therefore, when in Singapore, you should comply with the dress code and choose clothing appropriate to the environment and standards of the country. This helps maintain public order and respect for social and cultural values in Singapore. This is probably the reason why we don't see Singaporean women appearing in sexy outfits on the streets. It seems like their dressing style is also quite boring when the country introduces these restrictions. But this is not the most absurd thing that exists in Singapore. The following ban will make you feel even more shocked. Feeding pigeons is prohibited. Singapore has a lot of pigeons. They often swoop at tourists to beg for food, but no matter how cute they are, don't be foolish and give them something to eat if you don't want to lose several $100s. Specifically, that's a few hundred just for feeding the pigeons. In Singapore, throwing leftover bread to pigeons or feeding them can get tourists fined 500 SGD. The authorities have long been aware of the dangers pigeons pose to human health, not to mention the damage caused by bird droppings. Previous efforts to reduce bird numbers, such as using nets or electrical devices to detect bird roosts, have not been very successful. What makes the recent situation particularly serious in Singapore is that the number of tourists has gradually increased, causing bird feed consumption and waste to rise as well. This also means that the number of pigeons here has increased, causing significant damage to historical buildings in the area. Consequently, a ban was issued. Of course, many pigeons will die due to lack of food in Singapore. Number 2, it is forbidden to think about ending your own life. I have a very difficult question to ask you. When a person has chosen the path of ending their own life, are they still afraid of the law? It's really difficult to punish in this case because you have already subjected yourself to the harshest punishment. However, this action is still illegal in Singapore. Mental health issues are of concern in Singapore, and there are organizations and medical facilities that provide psychiatric support services. If you or someone you know is facing mental health difficulties, authorities will seek support from a medical professional or mental health organization to avoid the worst outcome. But if a person fails to end their life in Singapore, they may be imprisoned for about 2 years or sent to a mental institution until they give up that idea. It sounds quite complicated and useless, but there have been a few successful cases that at least temporarily protect these people's lives. But number 1, eating and drinking is prohibited on the subway. The subway is a popular means of transportation between famous tourist destinations in Singapore. However, traveling by subway also has its own regulations, especially the prohibition of eating food and drinks on the train. In other countries, when you eat food on public transportation, you might just get a reminder. But in Singapore, you can be fined up to 500 SGD. In addition, when bringing food on the train, be careful not to bring durian. Even if you don't eat it, you can still be fined, as the strong durian smell can cause discomfort and affect other passengers. Additionally, you are not allowed to make noise on the subway. Making noise can disturb others and create an uncomfortable environment. Keeping the environment on the train quiet and being respectful of fellow passengers is an important part of etiquette and courtesy when using public transportation like the subway. Singaporeans are quite similar to Japanese people in that they hate being disturbed in public places. So, it's best to keep quiet in common spaces if you don't want to lose money to the Singapore police. Take a pen and paper and write down what I just said. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video. We hope that the content has provided valuable and useful information to you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below. We look forward to hearing from you. If you like the content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to update yourself with the latest videos from us. Also, share this video with your friends if you think they will enjoy it too.